colleague. We occasionally have gyms together and cry, weep over Department of Work and Pension policies and things like that. So she's a wonderful friend, but she's got a wealth of experience. She's Director of Strategy at Tavistock Relationships. Some of you may be familiar with Tavistock Centre for Couple Relationships. This is their new name. And some of you may have done training with them. So a leading organisation in the field, and we are privileged to be partners with them, friends with those guys. And some of you may remember Susanna Abs, who came to speak to us a few years ago as well. And Honor's also involved as trustee of the Early Intervention Foundation, so a wealth of experience to bring, and she's travelled to be with us just for this evening. So would you give her a very, very warm welcome?
I'd like to point out that this is a photograph of me before I met the DWP. It's only got worse. When Mark asked me, I don't know, sometime last year, he said, we have this national event, everybody comes and it is great. And he sold it to me and I just put it in my diary. And I've been thinking about you ever since and thinking, how curious will it be to be in a room of people who are preparing couples for marriage, you know, that a lifetime of love ahead of them. And there will also be people in this room who are thinking about people whose relationships are in acute distress and difficulty. And how do you find a way of talking about all of that? So you can tell probably from the way I'm going to sort of present tonight that I've had various thoughts. This has been through various iterations, but you have been very much on my mind. And a number of people in this room I know, and I know Elizabeth. And again, it's the fact that people like that are associated with you, and the fact that you do this work, and you are so thoughtful, and I have admired marriage care for a very long time, so truly the pleasure of being here is all mine. So I'm going to press these slides like this. Does this work? I'm assured it does. Maybe I should use a clicker. Would that be better? I'm going to change it. Thank you. We'll just pretend that didn't happen. Yeah. So I did, as I say, I gave it some thought, and the thing that I always struggle with is thinking about what on earth to call something. So I was thinking, what is it that you do? And you're there, you are the people working in the field of love, and I was trying to think also about the other important things that you do. So you're preparing people for what is to come, but you're holding on to them when their lives are very hard and difficult, and you may be one of the few people that people can better tolerate to talk to. They maybe have exhausted their family and friends, or maybe they feel like they can't talk to family and friends about the difficulty their relationships are in. So again, it's about us understanding, actually, however hard it is to hear the distress and difficulty of others, we are immensely privileged. But I also thought what was important about an institution like yours and people like you is that you hold the hope. For lots of people, they're looking at you thinking, will we be able to survive this? And I know that that's part of what's in your mind as well. So I was thinking about this backwards and forwards, and can we help people? Well, yes, we can, and no, we can't, and sometimes we do. Nothing in the life that we live and the couple's lives that we work for and with is certain. But I just thought perhaps one of the things that would be important to think about, it sometimes doesn't sound terribly fascinatingly interesting and makes your heart beat fast, but I thought it would be sensible for you to know and have a grip on some of the emerging evidence about the importance of parental couple relationships, in particular to children, because that does go in a way to the heart of marriage preparation, and it also is one of the things we need to be contemplating when a parental couple come and talk to us about the distress they're in, and also when people are when people in our own lives are in relationship distress. We need to be having that child in our mind. So I thought I'd show you one that I made earlier, actually. So this is Harry, and he's 6 months old. He has trouble sleeping, and his mum's a bit depressed and dad's at work, and a professional's coming to you to have a think about what we could do, what can we do. And already I know that those of you who've got therapeutic training are thinking about what this means, a child who's distressed and hard to settle, and what that means for the parental couple as well, what lack of sleep does to people. It can make them crazed and dazed. And then I thought you might as well meet Sarah. So this is the report from the woman who runs a really nice drop-in baby yoga session at the local children's centre. And she's spotted Sarah, and she says, oh, she's the mother of the little one who's having difficulty sleeping. She's noticed that Harry is a real dear, but that Sarah seems to have difficulty in generating any enthusiasm. And this very delightful yoga teacher, who doesn't know anything at all about mental health, no official training, has spotted that she might be depressed. And then they say, we don't know much about the family, there's a drop-in, we just offer it, people come if they want to, we can't ask them any questions, that would be terrible if we did that. And then she says there might be a dad, I don't like to ask, just in case, And there are children's centres in this country who will not be celebrating Father's Day in a couple of weeks' time on that basis, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Absolutely ashamed, because dads, fathers, are really important to children, and they're important to children whether they live with them and take an active part in their lives, or whether they don't live with them. They never see that there's still a father, and they're still in the child's mind, and that much you know. And then finally, the dad in question, who is Michael. And this is from Michael's firm of lawyers. He's on a performance review. That is a bad thing. That's not a good thing. We had quite high hopes of him, but we manage him tightly. He's good. People like him, but he isn't quite the right fit for the firm. Something of a rough diamond. And then they go on to say, I expect he knows his future isn't here. He'll be looking around for other things, maybe closer to home. A small baby, wife bit demanding. You know how it is. So that's the people that you're going to see. This is them. And I think I can do this. Is this right? You see, it's so encouraging. Because I'm doubtful. So I expect some of you see people who've had those conversations at home. And you can see people around you. Have a conversation about what you think is going on and what that script is like. So I think that script gets played out many a night. And is there an underscript to that? Can you see a subscript and think about where Harry is in their minds? The one thing I don't want you to do is to interpret it. I know you can. That's not the issue. I know how delightfully, intelligently you would do that, but don't do that. Hang on to how it makes you feel, and then we'll have a think about it afterwards. So just give yourselves a few minutes. Make yourselves into groups and teams to talk. Yes, I know, talk to each other. Horrible. There you are. I think you all notice a number of missteps. My first advice to Michael, I think, probably would be, don't say that you're not hungry. Don't do that. That's a very foolish thing to say. Eat whatever is put in front of you. And that I would offer him for free. And then perhaps we can move on. But you all got the sense that this is the script. This is what they do. This is night after night. This is how it is for them. And what's really interesting, the research is very clear that the more often it is like this, you can tell me what you think the answer is, how much more ready are people prepared to go home to it. They're less likely to rush home to that. So part of our job, when we think about preparing people for a life of a relationship together, is to prepare them when it's going to be really hard. How will you manage it? How will your life be when one of you has lots and lots and lots of work, more work than you can fit into a life and the other person has work that's not recognised in this society as work, which is the business of rearing children. How are you going to manage all of that? Because there's the overprivileging of one. I think that her enraged sense of feeling utterly displaced from the world of work, her envy of his life at work, is there and gets played out in lots of relationships, and many of you were thinking about that. I think you noticed the dance, the sort of, was there the potential for points of resolution, where there were some fleeting moments where you see it could have been different, but it didn't. You know, he got his laptop out again, you know, Michael did that. He also comes in, and everybody thinks that there's something wrong with the film, because that first long silence. And I think that's what we also see, don't you? See it in a therapy room, but you can see it between people generally. They're sort of, I don't know how to approach you, because my anxiety is that whatever I say will be the wrong thing. So you saw all of this. What about how damaged? Is this relationship recoverable?
Yes.
God loves a trier. But actually, I think you're right. Which is, absolutely, I think you're right. I think, but how likely is it that these folks are going to find their way to somebody like you? Maybe. I would love to think that somehow in their social circle, or somehow they discover a route through to somebody like you or somebody like us that have stop relationships, or to relate. But often I think people start to reach out and think about getting relationship help, and it is very, very hard to help them, because that's the point at which they both come to the brutal reality that the relationship is so damaged and so distressed and so frayed and so torn that they need some help. I think what's interesting is what people do before they get to that point. Where do people go for advice in the first instance?
Friends and family.
Some people go to their parents, more people go to somebody in their family who's the same age as them, so sibling, or cousins, actually, interesting feature. And then friends, which could be really problematic, as can your brothers and sisters actually as well, because of the partisan nature of the advice, which is, I always told you who's a woman. What to expect. And I think people know that, and they start thinking about more neutral places. Where else do people go?
Internet.
They go online. The first place that people go before they even mention it to another human being is they have it on Google. What happens? I think my husband is cheating. I think my husband, and you get a list. Cheating is the first thing. And I think my wife is. I'm sure that's probably the same. I didn't Google that. I suspect it is. So people are desperately seeking information. Information is one thing. Help is quite another. So we need to find a way of connecting the idea that when you're seeking information, you might also want to seek some help. Somebody somewhere could give you a hand with this. So I think you're absolutely right. I think this relationship could be helped. You were also, all of you, noticing that Harry was absolutely nowhere in either of their minds, because you don't slam a door on a sleeping baby. No. Harry is only mentioned by Sarah as a weapon. Harry and I come at the bottom of your list, she says. So it's another thing to imagine. So there we are. So I suppose I think, if somehow they had managed to make their way to marriage, good for them. What is it that you're going to be doing with them? And I was thinking about all of the things that, the behaviours that Sarah and Michael would experience, and they would. And forensic listening sounds awful, but you are trained listeners. You listen with a quality that their brothers and sisters and cousins and mothers and friends won't be listening with. You're listening for the said and the unsaid. And actually what is interesting about the conversation that we've just had, or the row that we've just witnessed, is what's not said. All the pain and the anguish and the hurt is not said. And I think these two, if they were in a quiet room with somebody like you who they could trust, I think that they could be guided back to remembering what it was they wanted from each other, and why they got married and what they hope for and what they hope for home. And I think that's part of the conversation we need to have with people whose relationships are frazzled and frayed and under strain. But I think equally importantly, it's part of the conversation we have to have with people who are looking forward to a future together that at the moment none of this registers or features in. And part of our preparation for helping people think about this is telling them how difficult it can be. And that can feel quite punishing and harsh, but you know, if somebody said to you, you know, you want to climb Everest, it's great, fantastic view. You know, I would want reliably to be informed about how hard it was going to be to get there, and that we'd need some oxygen. And I think asking people to make a commitment that's going to last for the rest of their lives, we should be saying these are hard yards. And at times it's going to be really hard. At times you're going to want to give up. At times you're going to give in. At times you're going to want to be with somebody else who's more sympathetic and kinder and will give you more sex, which is usually what happens. But you are making a commitment to each other, and you're going to have to find a way to have the conversations you need to have that will keep your relationship sustained and alive and cradling you both, however difficult times can be. And I suppose that, I think, is the power both of preparing people for a life together, but also the interventions that you make when you need to, when people come to you saying, help. So I thought that Harry, being so invisible to his parents, it was all the more important that we thought about making Harry visible to ourselves. So I thought that we would think a little bit about what the evidence was and what it meant, so that we could honour the obligations we have to do the useful thing. Given that when people come to you and they have a problem, you can probably therapeutically think of 3 or 4, sometimes even 5 interventions and ways of shaping and framing, we should be doing the thing that's got some evidence behind it, and that should be our first choice. It's a bit like the antibiotic of first choice, we should go for that first. We should be doing the minimum. There's this notion of minimum sufficiency. We should be giving people the least that we can get away with that will help them, because then they will have to make their own way a little bit. We will strengthen them through the struggles that they will have to have. We give them everything they need. We're not being helpful to them because we are denuding them of their responsibility for taking chances and taking responsibility for their own actions. So those are some of the reasons which you yourselves know that we should be operating on minimum sufficiency. And again, I think the research matters, whether you're thinking about a lifetime ahead or thinking about the trouble that people come to you in. And I think particularly of those couples where they are coming to you for a conversation about what their married life is going to be like, and they are assuming, for example, that they're going to have children. And what we know is increasingly fertility can be a problem for people. And that's one of the conversations we need our couples to be having. What will it be like if we struggle to have a baby? What will it be like if we have a child who has a disability? What will our lives be like in all of these sets of circumstances? How can we imagine what we do? What sort of rules will we have for our conversations? We do a lot of work with some lovely American, actually they're Canadian, I have to say they're Canadian professors, they don't like me to say they're American professors. And they're called Professor Phil and Carolyn Cowan. And they developed this notion of the fair fight. And you can only have a fair fight with your partner if you've agreed the rules in advance and you've tested it on something that's not terribly difficult. You don't go in trying a fair fight on the thing where you feel that's the hill on which you are quite prepared to die. That won't help you at all. You need to develop it a bit like a muscle memory. This is how we fight. When we fight, this is how we fight. And we behave decently, and we use I statements, and we don't name call, and we never ever say, and another thing. Because you don't stack the dishwasher. So those are those sorts of things. And we can teach people this. And that's what's so delightful about it. And people look at me, I often give you an old-fashioned look when I talk about a fair fight. And I'll say, you're imagining I'm suggesting you put boxing gloves on, not at all. I'm saying, look at each other and you can hold each other's hands, but you need to be absolutely there. And ready to fight for something you believe in. This is not suggesting you should just roll over. All of us have things that we believe in and want to accomplish, and we need to show our partner how much they matter to us. Fighting's worth it, because making up afterwards is great too. So this is from the Early Intervention Foundation that Mark mentioned, and it isn't just because I'm associated with it and proud to be so, but it's because they did in 2016 a magisterial review called What Works to Enhance Parental Relationships and Improve Outcomes for Children, which is probably one of the snappiest titles you've ever. But it's wonderful. It's international research and it's of enormous quality, and it's a meta-analysis as well, so it's looked at research from 5 continents and over 60 countries. So there are 5 key policy findings, and I just wanted us to think about all 5 in turn. The first, and probably the most important, is that it is the quality of the interparental relationship, and specifically how parents communicate and relate to each other, that is the primary influence on children's long-term outcomes, essentially. And I wondered what you thought about that. No, you're so wise, you're just nodding. That's lovely, but why don't you have a little talk about it? Go on, in your groups, go on. This is how we're going to do this. You're going to work just as hard as people. When parents are entrenched in conflict, the idea of the child is very, very far from the mind. And some of you will know the work of people like Errol and Olev, who talk about the notion of the spillover effect, which is, you can see it sometimes in the street. So a couple are having a row about something, and a little child is beside them and starts pulling at somebody's trousers, pointing something out or wanting or needing something. And the parent who's being something demanded of them turns to the child with the same face that they're using to their partner, of rage often, and uses the same tone of voice to the child, who has done something they would do often, and unexpectedly they get this thing. One of the most important things I think that we can help parents do is to know what their angry faces look like. I was always told by my supervisor, send them upstairs and make them roar into a mirror so that they can see how terrifying their faces are. I think our parents genuinely don't know quite how terrifying it could be. And again, I suppose all we're trying to do is punctuate what has become usual and ordinary with ways of helping people put a different thought into their mind so that they can think about, I don't want my child to see this face. I don't want my child to see this face, I have to have a different face, which means I have to have a different thought. And I think these are the sorts of things that matter to parents. So that was the first finding, probably unremarkable really. 2 more. So parents and couples who engage in frequent, intense and poorly resolved interparental conflicts put children's mental health and long-term life chances at risk. Now my suspicion is you wouldn't disagree with me either. The issue is that definition possibly. We're talking about, the words individually make perfect sense, don't they? Frequent, I think we know what that is, intense, we know what that is, and poorly resolved, we know what that is. But these 3 words have come to mean the definition of parental conflict that's damaging to children. Children, and we're going to look at the effect of frequent conflict on children's brains in a minute. The intensity of it is something that children identify readily. Some of you may know Patrick Stewart's role as a UN ambassador. He's a UN ambassador around domestic violence, actually. So when he's not charting the spaceship Enterprise, he's... and he is a child who grew up in a household where there was domestic violence, and he said that by the age of 5, he knew exactly the moment when he had to run down the stairs, open the living room door and thrust himself between his parents because he could stop his dad from hitting his mum. And he was saying no child at the age of 5 should have to become an expert on the taxonomy of violence, and he's absolutely right. But we've got children who are expert on how the conflict is building between their parents. We've got children who are hypervigilant. We've got children whose mental health is being compromised by this experience of their lives. And if you said to their parents, this is what is happening, firstly they would deny. No, he doesn't even notice. And then they would minimise. And it isn't our job to take them through, this enormously huge research report. It's our job to know so that we can distill it, so that we can ask questions which puts into their mind the consequences of the relationship quality that they are having with their partner. And then we've got children of all ages can be affected. And I think this is the disappointing finding. Because I think lots of people, including me, had hoped that children who grew up in relationships which were stable and happy, perhaps until a child was 11 or even adolescent, that somehow would produce a sort of a blanket of care, or it would give a child some resilience. But it's to be just as destructive whenever it happens, however old a child is. And I think that's something that we have to understand, given the life course of families and what that means. So you'll have several children of different ages, and it will affect them all, but it may affect them all differently. You understand that. This is both the sort of problematic and optimistic finding, perhaps, which is that it's the context of the family's lived life and the environment in which a child is growing up beyond the family that can have an effect to either enhance the effect of conflict, make it worse, or reduce it. Now, I think that's something to do with children who find themselves going to a safe place. So those children, and you'll know some of them yourselves, who come to your house and you know that their parents are arguing a lot. They're just coming somewhere where people don't argue and they get some respite from it. But lots of children's school is that place. The problem is that it's very hard to put out of your mind the conflict, and these are the children who find it very hard to learn. So when we look at relationship quality impacting on children's educational attainment, it's because a child does not have the capacity to take anything more in. And that's one of the things that we can be talking with parents about the physical and psychophysiological effects of conflict on children. And then finally, this is the one that I need your help with, really, because there's no answer to this. We don't know what the answer is, really. I'm not even sure we know what the question is, actually. But it's suggesting that interparental conflict in heterosexual couples seems to affect the father-child relationship more adversely than the mother-child relationship. And we don't know why that is. Anybody have any thoughts about that? What do you think?
I wonder if it's because the mother-child relationship is the very first one. The
Primary caregiver.
producing for a start and the suckling. And maybe that bond remains strong. In spite of.
It's entirely plausible, isn't it? The truth is we don't know. What we do know in therapy, though, and I don't know whether this is just, this is correlation, not causation. We know in therapy, in heterosexual couples, where men are dissatisfied with relationship quality, their relationship with their daughters is worse. And I think that's something about our children contain the adults who made them. And that's another thing I think we need to be talking to parents about when they're very angry with their partner and talk about their partner very dismissively and savagely in front of a child. I once worked with a little boy who said what he wanted for Christmas was when his mum answered the phone and it was his dad, she didn't go because it hurt him because he was half his dad. And he was absolutely right. And I think we have to remind parents of that. And these children are half their dads when their dads are in prison, abandoned them, gone far away. They're nevertheless still half. And it can be very, very hard, I think, for the parent who's left with the child who feels very badly treated by that person. It can be easy to be angry with that part of the child. The problem is that the child doesn't know that. The child just experiences this attack on them. So I've shown you this wonderful piece of research, which is done by the Fatherhood Institute. Does anybody read their research? Marvellous stuff. And it's called Who's the Bloke in the Room? And it was their study into the involvement of fathers in parents-to-be services. I will cease bothering the NHS. I sit on my local clinical commissioning group. I will retire gracefully when I have got parent-to-be services instead of maternity services. What percentage of children, babies, are registered in the names of both parents in this country? 92%. How many women arrive in labour with the father of the baby? 97.9%. It's a lot, isn't it? And I think, here we are, we've got dads who've been involved. Sometimes they're very surprised by the fact their partner's pregnant. We need to do pieces of work with people on this, and we need to help, we need to honour that role, we need to honour the parental couple relationship. The only relationship the NHS allows is in maternity, which is about the mother and the infant. That's the only dyadical relationship the NHS recognises, until you get way down the line into offering couple therapy for depression, when people have a mental health, a serious mental health. So, again, we're talking over that very delicious supper about couple therapy being outside the NHS. I think if it were inside the NHS, services would be completely different. I feel like we're still constantly making a case for thinking about relationships because other people are just tin-eared. And there are a variety of reasons why they're tin-eared. Largely to do with the fact that when we talk about couple relationships, people instantly think about themselves, which I'm going to get you to do in a minute as well, just warning you. I know you're excited about that. I did want to talk to you about bell curves and ACEs. Well, in fact, most I wanted to talk to you about ACEs. Has anybody encountered adverse childhood experiences? Some of you will have done. Old thing from America, developed by Kaiser, big insurance company, white collar insurance. They were insuring, clerks and professionals, and they did a piece of work using actuaries, thinking about how they actually need to insure people for, and they realised that there was something, a whole range of risk factors that they should look at. And these are there are 10 questions you ask people. If you want to do your own ACE score, you can. Go onto the ACEs Too High website. What they were interested in was why people dropped out of an obesity clinic. They thought there was something really interesting here. These people knew they were obese, they agreed to treatment, and then they dropped out, and then they were very ill. They were more prone, obviously, to diabetes. So they then said, why are some people more prone to diabetes? What is it about? So they looked at the research and they got various universities to help them. And so they developed this notion that there are about 10 key factors. And you can get to those if you ask people the most astonishingly difficult and painful questions. And I'll choose one to read to you. One is, when you were a child, undefined, did somebody who lived with you ever touch you, fondle you, touch your body in a sexual way, try to actually have oral, anal or vaginal sex with you? That's a tough question to ask, and they're all a bit like that. But they are the ones that identify people with a high degree of risk. It's just that you probably wouldn't leave those lying around in a GP surgery and ask people to fill them in, and nor should you. Nobody should ever. This is not for general consumption. The point about it was that if you asked everybody in Milton Keynes these questions, you would get a bell curve. There would be the distribution that we would expect. Some people would have very few adverse childhood events, and some people would have a lot. And Milton Keynes would then be thinking about the probable incidence of things that they didn't want to happen to people, and they could build services, which is why people are very interested in them. I'm very interested in them because two of them particularly relate to relationships. One is about domestic violence, and one is about being abandoned by a parent through divorce, separation, or death. And it's very unusual to have two items on a scale like this that relate to the work that I do and the work that you do, and we should be really pleased. And just to follow that through, doing your own ACE score doesn't mean, with your 7 ACEs, that you are going to die very young. It means that in the population as a whole, people with 7 or more ACEs are much more likely to attempt suicide, to smoke, to have awful cardiac arrests, and so on. So it's a population screen. It matters. It's interesting and it's important. And 2 of the questions relate to relationships, early relationship experiences, and so that is what is going to help us, I think, ultimately bring relationship quality to the forefront of people's minds. And we should be talking about that, and we should be talking about ACEs. So I urge you to have a bit of a think about ACEs inside marriage care. I'm looking at Mark, who knows about them already, actually. So here we are, it's all quiet already, but this is this notion about being chased by a bear. This one here, he's not taking any prisoners. What should you do if you're chased by a bear?
Stand still.
You should stand still and make yourself look very big, which for me is problematic because I'm 5'1". So I'm going to stand behind you to look bigger than me. And if you can't stand very still and make yourself look very big, make a noise. And the other option, run! Run like you have never run before. Okay. And that is exactly what we're describing. We're describing the flight and fight mechanism. So do I fight this bear? Or do I run? And what happens in flight and fight is that our thinking brain is switched off, and our body is absolutely deluged with a surge of hormones that help us, that prime us, that shut things down, like our digestion. There's no digestion going on. Can't waste calories on that. If I need to send you up a tree, that's the bit you need to be concentrating on. So this is full on flight or fight, and that's what happens when we are aroused by heightened anxiety. So that's, again, that's all good if you're in a forest, you're going to make yourself big, or you're going to run. But the point of this, as you can see this lumbering towards you, I know, is what if the bear lives in your own home? What about if the bear is your parents' relationship? What about if the bear is the ongoing, frequent, intense, unresolved conflict that you have to live with that bathes you all the time? You are going to be a child. Somebody did a piece of research that suggested children who live with a degree of parental conflict that is damaging is like living in a battlefield. These are children with the same levels of stress hormones as children who live in Syrian cities being bombed. So we need, as I say, to know this because we need to be explaining to parents that enduring conflict does things to children's brains because it alters their brains and it makes them doubt the reliability of the safety of the world, and it closes down options for them that might otherwise be healthy ones. So we have got a whole deal of work to do when parents are in conflict. I am not talking about parents who have a good old argy-bargy once in a while, like why did you park the car there? That's not this argument. This is the child who wakes up with conflict and goes to bed in silent, frozen conflict. These are parents who are denying that it's there. These are parents who are hurting and harming each other. Not necessarily domestic violence and abuse, but these are children who are being exposed to levels of stress that are unacceptable, and we should be doing something about it. So I suppose I was really interested in what we could do and what we can talk about and what happens when people miss marriage preparation. How can we catch them? How can we help them? And how can we hold them? And how can we have them think about things? So I suppose I was really interested in what we talk about with couples when they come and see us, what we talk about the nature of love and care and compassion for each other when there's such hostility and difficulty. And I was particularly interested, and I've been interested in a long time, about trust and betrayed trust. And there's something here, I suppose I was thinking back to Sarah and Michael really, there's some quality in that conversation which is about a loss of trust that this relationship will sustain either of them. And how do you get people like that to remember why they came together and to believe that they can make something better together? So there you are, we're all of us trying to grapple with these things. But I suppose I was thinking about in the helping cupboard, there's a secret ingredient. And I wondered if you knew what it was. It's obviously not an injection. It's obviously not a book. What is the secret ingredient in helping? You're so generous because you're putting it there, aren't you? But it's you! You are the secret ingredient. Because when people make their way to people who can help, I think what's interesting is a hesitation. And I think sometimes that's really very sensible, looking and seeing, will this fit, will this work? But I think what's interesting is the use that people make of help. And the research is really clear. That alliance that couples can make with a therapist and a counsellor, a helper, you don't need to be qualified, a helper, somebody who can truly listen and not be bowled over by the unhappiness and the misery and the rage, who can tolerate it and listen through all of that, who can continue to ask a helpful question, who can do a bit of summing up and connecting, who can take the helicopter view and have a bit of a wonder. These people are the people that people remember and talk about and hold on to, because you get inside them. What would Barry do if he were here? He'd be saying, we should be. You know, it's really interesting talking to people after who've left therapy years ago, what they take with them. And it's people like you. So I'd like to give you the chance to have a pie. And this is when I need some lovely helpers, please. Because I need to give out these pieces of paper to everybody in the room, and I hope I've brought enough. I've helpfully divided them in two. Well, that was as far as I got. I could have done better. I could have done more. What you're going to get is a piece of paper with a circle on it. That's how magical this is. That's how high-tech I roll. And it's called The Pie. And it was developed by Phil and Carolyn Cowan, who I spoke of earlier. And it was a way of getting couples to think about who they are in their relationships and outside and beyond their relationships. So I hope you all have a pencil. In fact, I know you do, because in your packs you were given one. And you've got packs to lean on. So it's all good. So I would like you to think firstly, and we aren't going to share this, so you could be as free as you like with it. I need you to decide a list of all the many and lovely things that you do in your life, all the roles that you are, and write them down either side of the pie. And this normally takes about 10 minutes, but I'm going to rush you because I'm mean. And then when you've got your roles, you can choose to cut your pie up. And you can give the roles as much resource as you think they take from you. Is there enough for everybody? This is when I discover the bell ringers amongst you. I'm always fascinated by people like that. And philately. Oh, there's no wrong. There's no wrong. Just divide your pie up and you can ignore what you've written. Right. Oh, actually, if you'd like, we can just give you a few more. You can use your roll. So we've got spares for people who suddenly realise they made a terrible error. Yes. Do what? So to I've got lipstick. Who are these people arriving? Are you expecting a large coach for? And then you will have got to the stage in this exercise where you've got a lot of rolls on either side of your pie, and you won't have made a line on the pie. So I urge you to do that. Commit. Make a line. Chop it up. It can't be wrong, because it's yours. It can only be right. I did this recently, and a parent ripped out their protractor. Would most people's pie be cut into slices now? Cut into a slice. Okay. As I say, you can perfect this in your bed tonight if you want to. And as you can see, all you need to do this exercise is a sheet of A4 in a circle. When we use this is in the very first group we have for our parental couples. And each parent does it, and what then happens? They argue. They argue like hell. And they look at each other's pies and they disagree with each other's pies, which is very interesting. And what is interesting, I think, about pies is that I've now seen about 1,000. I looked at every single one of them, and I've seen 1,000, and I can spot a man's pie. And it's interesting, and it's the thing that causes the argument, because in the first iteration of this pie exercise, men will have a chunk, often as big as a quarter, which will be football, pub, friends, shed, or some combination. That's me being exceptionally rude, but it's sort of outside, beyond what I have with you. The bit of me that I need to look after in order to be the person you want me to be for the rest of 3/4 of the pie. Women, nothing like that. Nothing. And that's the argument. How dare you have a quarter of your pie when I've got nothing? And then the argument goes, but you have failed on your pie to put book group, friends, the spa day you have every month. You know, it's just not there. You haven't put it on. So as I say, this is part of the argument. We let it run for a bit because, you know, we're relationship therapists, we can cope with conflict. And then it gets boring because we've done this a lot of times. And we'll say, what you've got is a disagreement about the resources that you have. In a relationship, money is a resource, time is a resource, and our personal energy is a resource. And we're often quite good at organising money, you know, who earns it, who spends it, the agreements about that. We don't talk about how we spend our time and our energy, and that's the bit that we need to recapture and remember. And so we offer parents the opportunity to draw out a second pie. I've given you pie 1, but there's pie 2, which has the subtle difference of being called pie 2 at the top. But the only way that I could put something on my pie that wasn't there is either taking something off my list of rolls and giving them to my partner, or we both decide that nobody needs to do that, or my partner decides to take that on and put it onto their pie. And what then goes? And this is also the point in the proceedings where some unfortunate parent, and this happens cross-gender, male and female, and in our same-sex groups as well, their head will drop onto their bit of paper and they'll say, I have forgotten to put on my relationship with you. And you know, and there's often some hollow laughter. But we can be so busy so busy that's not the thing that we remember, that we are partners and lovers and good friends and supporters and companions and all of that. Those are the things that don't go. We're quite good at looking after our children, all those parental roles are there, and our work is there, and sometimes our parents or our, grandchildren are there. So a pie is just a way to get people to have a conversation if you're struggling to get people to have a conversation. But I suppose I was thinking how useful a pie would be for people who don't yet know that this might be one of the struggles they'll have in their lives, and whether thinking about how we manage our resource, not just the money resource but the time resource, because if we could get people into some form of agreement about this, maybe we could avoid some of the more usual forms of conflict. So these are the top 5 areas of parental conflict and parenting, and this is from Jay Belsky, who teaches at the Institute of Education, actually. But this is again a piece of meta research, and the 5 key areas. There's a lovely acronym of SHAME. What do any of those things stand for?
Shouting. Sex.
Thank you. Say it loud.
Sex.
Louder.
Sex.
Louder.
Sex.
Oh, come on, people, shout. 1, 2, 3.
Sex.
Feeble. 1, 2, 3.
Sex.
Oh, yes. More. Last time. 1, 2, 3.
Sex.
We can shout sex. We are good people, and it's there at the heart of lots of relationship difficulties, and it's the one unburdening that people know they can come and talk to you about if they can talk to nobody else about it. And sex and intimacy is our communication and the glue that holds relationships together, and it's often one of the most fraught and painful areas that couples tackle and don't tackle in their lives, and it's hugely important. What about any of the others? M, you can get that one.
Money.
Absolutely. E, employment. Who does what? It literally who does what, who goes out to work and how much work they do. A, takes us a bit to the pie activities, what I do, what you do, what we do together, what we do as a family. That's often a source of enormous conflict. And H, household, absolutely, household chores, who does what around the house. And the top area of raging and conflict is what in terms of household chores?
Dishwasher.
I would love it to be the dishwasher. They make perfect sense. It's rubbish. Who puts out the rubbish? Yeah, there you are. You knew it, really. So, knowing all of that, this is about us knowing all of this so that we can say to people, in your adult married lives, these things will occur. These things will happen. Sure as eggs is eggs. You would not be human if you didn't have conflict. Your job is to think about what it will feel like and what you will do about it, how you will resolve it and make good and repair. Because that's what every relationship needs. And it's what our children, more than anything, need to see from us as their parents. They need to see us in conflict. They need to see us being disgraceful once in a while, and behaving badly, then being truly ashamed and contrite and apologising, and for our apology to be accepted and to be there some making good. And a child needs to see the whole arc of that. Otherwise, when they go to bed and we're still enraged and they wake up the next morning and we're absolutely fine, they don't know what's happened. And that's unfair, and particularly for little children in the grip of magical thinking, they can imagine it's something that they did and therefore. So I just thought I'd leave you with some statistics, because who doesn't love a graph? So this is the count. So here we are. This is what happens when we have children. We start off at honeymoon levels of happiness. Fantastic. And this is true actually of heterosexual and gay and lesbian parents who adopt actually as well. So there we are. So what is happening? Tell me what is happening. Describe that slide to me. Relationship quality is, and that's the impact of an infant. And it's why fragile relationships tend to really be under such strain in that first year of an infant's life that they break up. So those, when you're meeting friends and they tell you that they're having a tremendously bad time at the moment, but they've decided to have a baby together, you have to say no. That's awful. Research says you shouldn't. Research says you should try a dog, a really yappy dog. If you can manage that, maybe you'll be all right. So at 5.5, the Cowans went back and looked. So what happens at 5.5? Starts to get better because they go to school. No, it gets worse. Much worse. You have to remember this is an average. It gets worse. When does it get better? When they leave home. If you're still together, hold on. Those of you who've got adolescents, it's coming. But what happens when they finish university? It's a double dip recession. So you've just got to keep on holding on, haven't you, really? You've just got to. The Cowans would say that we've become, it doesn't sometimes feel look like it, but we have become infinitely better at being parents, and we've become pretty blooming rubbish at being couples. And we need to pay far more attention to it, and we need to give it time, and we should do that without feeling the least bit guilty about our children. Because it isn't families that break down, it's relationships that break down. And we need to remind people of that and say, if you don't want that to happen to you, you don't want that to happen to your children, look after what you've got, because it really matters. So the best advocate for that is Daisy. Has anybody seen The Secret Life of 5-year-olds? I'm sure you have. Daisy is my absolute favourite. Every time she gets me with that bit of self-soothing at the end, it's really hard to watch. She says, they're still friends, which I imagine is something that she's been told rather than something she's observed. So here we are, here's Daisy, and she's going to be fine. Children survive divorce and separation. It isn't the act of divorcing and separating that hurts and harms children, it's what leads up to it and it's what's after it. And our job of work is to help people be very good co-parents if that's the choice they're going to make. But I hold Daisy in my mind, and I think she's really useful to think about when we think about the impact on children. Her parents, we see her parents, you may remember them, they're delightful people with new partners. There is no way on God's good earth they're getting back together again. But Daisy holds the hope, as little children often do. And our parents need to know that, and they need not to squash it out of her, but they need to help her understand about what the realistic prospects are. So I'm just drawing to a close now. This is another voice of another young child. I met a young woman called Shyster, who was a young advocate at Kafka's on the family justice during Young People's Court. She said, children in the middle of parental conflict are made to feel like a messenger, a spy, a judge, and a witness. And none of those roles are acceptable to a child. And I think part of our challenge is to remind parents about the position they put children in when they don't have them in their mind, whether we are thinking about the future or thinking about the now. So my last slide. So working in the field of love, that's you and why we should, unarguable, absolutely unassailable case for the work that you do. There is huge research that supports your endeavours. In early intervention in marriage preparation is vitally important, and we need to know more about what works in this country. Late intervention works as well. We can help people with their relationships to unravelling and under strain. And I do believe, along with Freud, as I suspect you do, that to most questions about difficulties in current life, love and work are a good part of the answer. And so that's all there is. Love and work and love. And he meant love in the sense of knowing and being known by somebody, to have somebody who holds you in their mind. And work as in the sense of productive, useful contribution to make that would be recognised. And so I do believe that we can repair and mend and patch relationships. And you and your work is vital in that. So I thank you.